And in 5, 4, 3, 2... Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR FILM NOOB Podcast, where my audio and video is still not in sync because reasons. Devin, we haven't seen you for a couple episodes now. What have you been up to, man?
I don't even remember why we didn't have the last
Weren't
episode.
you covering the caucus or something like that?
Oh, yeah, okay. I've been around in so many places. Yeah, there was caucuses in Iowa, so I was with CBS covering some of that in the Microsoft Media Center, as they call it. And
yeah, what is that about? The Microsoft taking over the branding, all that stuff?
It's just they provided a venue with internet, Wi-Fi that actually worked, which I was surprised with considering all the press people there, but just a press area and a gigantic screen to see live results as they accumulate. And they put their branding on it because they paid for all of it. And we set up shop in there. The real fun was seeing all of the, I guess you could call it technology that was walking around the place. There was lots of people using cell phones to report with like microphones plugged into them and selfie sticks. And I guess Facebook has some kind of streaming now, and so that was a big thing there. So there was, yeah. So obviously these are like more the bloggers and everything else. So NBC and everyone else comes in. They bring in their lights and their gear and everything else. It's a big, it's a really big production, and there was cables everywhere. And then, yeah, you had these bloggers and these newspaper guys who were walking around with cell phones and like microphones attached to them and doing their little reports on it. And it was it was fun to see. Like, it's like, is that really going to be the future? But obviously, I don't think so, because even though those cameras may be 4K, the lighting and framing and things like that all become important, because we worked pretty hard on our shot. We probably spent like a good hour and a half, 2 hours putting together the lights and the chairs and everything else for our shot to make sure it was a good shot. So I don't imagine that will ever get past that, but it was really fun to see. And what's really interesting is that there's so many cables from everywhere, because you have a bazillion satellite trucks. You have a lot of cabling going from where somebody is shooting to where they're going to actually capture it or broadcast from it, and all kinds of stuff. And the crazy part is that most of these companies, news broadcasters, have to move so quickly between locations for these caucuses. They just cut all the cables, or they unplug them and then take the gear and go, because it's just not worth.
And then run new cables when they get to the new location?
They just buy new cables and roll them out. They buy them on reels, they roll them out, set them up, and then when they're done, they just cut them and they run, because it's not worth the money to clean them up. It kind of reminds me of like a Lord of War and stuff like that, where the U.S. military, it costs too much money to ship all the guns back, so they'll just leave them there because it's cheaper to just make new guns than to do that. And this is the exact same situation. So there's a bunch of cables there. I'm sure it's probably in the contract of the venue, who's ever paying for the venue and using it, that there's some kind of cleanup cost where they have to clean up everyone else's cables. But there's probably something like a good two semis worth of cables that are all just going to be cut and left there every time they pick up and leave from a location. And that was kind of interesting to see and watch. But yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of 20-hour days, sleepless nights. And all
you
that
still
kind of stuff.
sound a little dazed from
it
the
is,
experience.
because, yeah, it was. And I got back here, and then I had to fill in for somebody who's sick, so I'm doing double duty with 2 studios simultaneously this weekend. So, yeah, there's not a whole lot of sleep there for me. But, DJ, what's been new with you?
My week has been a lot better. I'm working on the decision-making process for some UPS systems for some major server backups for long-term video storage. So they bought a bunch of really expensive batteries to back this whole system up, and turns out VRLA, if you know anything about batteries, is not the way to go. But enough about giant industrial battery systems. I think it is probably time for the news. First thing on the list is actually some new lenses. This is from Samyang, the parent company that makes all kinds of stuff. You've heard of their branding between the Rokinon, Samyang, and all the other brands. Their cinema line of lenses was not quite complete. They had an 85, a 50, and a 24 T1.5. They are now adding a 35 T1.5 and a 14 T3.1 lens to the roundup. It looks like the price is going to set you back about $2,000 per lens. They are a very nice package, and it does look like they're going to be selling them in kits on B&H. Look for those between $6,000 and $8,000 for an entire cinema lineup. Devin, what do you think of these new Samyang cinema lenses?
I'd still like to get my hands on one and really try it out. From the tests I've seen, I still think that they are a huge bargain, even though $2,000 for a manual prime lens seems like a lot. You know, when you compare it to the Canon line, of course, the price gap is huge, and the performance seems to be pretty on par for something like the Canon. But even for renting purposes, these are extremely affordable lenses, and while, you know, for personal use, I probably wouldn't end up ever buying them just because I can't justify using them that much compared to maybe just like the Rokinon Cine line, which is a couple hundred per lens. It sounds like such a small thing, but one of the huge features of these lenses is the fact that they're all identically sized. So when you're switching between lenses really quick, you don't need to move your follow focus or your iris focus or anything like that. These all and they kind of have the same hole at the end and the same distance from things, and so therefore when you're using a matte box, like, you don't have to worry about it bumping into you know, your ND filters in your matte box or anything like that. So
yeah, your gearing is going to be identical on each one of these for your follow focus, which is pretty nice actually. But is that worth the spending the extra
$2,000 of nice, right? So that's why I say, like, for renting and for small indie projects and stuff like that, this is really great to see. Anything that can kind of hold a light up to like the more serious, like Zeiss and Canon glass, but bring it into a range where independents and low budget to micro and no budget films can actually start using gear on this level. I think we'll make several DPs very happy.
Yeah, these are about half the price, roughly, of Canon's cinema line of lenses. So where those are sitting in the $5,000, $4,000 or so a piece range, the Samyang lenses are quite a bit more affordable. So definitely an interesting proposition. Glad to see that they're continuing with that lineup. If you are interested, lensrental.com, not a sponsor of the show, but where I often rent gear, has these on rental, the rental list. So you can get those for fairly affordable. Actually, it looks like about $150 per lens for a week. So that's not too bad. Moving on down the line, I don't know where I was going with that, rambling as I read through these. This next one is actually something that's kind of near and dear to my heart, and something I've had to use more than once. It is a tablet that is capable of basically stylus interaction. If you haven't used any of these Wacom or the Wave, I believe, is another one. All of these stylus interfaces are really great for both motion graphics and for rotoscoping work if you have to do a lot of that sort of thing. And the price on this is going to compete with the Wacom tablets, which are somewhere, the Cintiqs, I believe, are in the $2,000 range, and this is $799 from Monoprice. Now, there are even cheaper versions of this. This Monoprice unit is a clone of the other touch tablet interface setups that are available out there, but it's pretty well refined. You don't have to worry about possibly getting weird power cords and so on. And they've got it for $599 now. It's come down a bit, man. So what do you think? A 22-inch 1080p pin display tablet that allows multiple points of pressure interaction. Would you go for something like this, Devin?
I've tried using a tablet a little bit, not one with a built-in screen, but that would definitely be a treat. But I've tried it before to use like full-on for editing because I've seen some guys swear by it. I think for me personally, I'm kind of really dedicated to a mouse and keyboard with some programmable macros and things like that because in video editing I use a lot of macros. And so on the flip side, in After Effects or something like that, where I'm going for rotoscoping or a lot of movement trails and stuff like that, I can see where every once in a while a tablet would become really useful. But in that case, then I'd go for the Monoprice tablet that's like $50 or $70 that doesn't have the built-in screen for the few times where I want that kind of stylus-like input to it. But in this case, this is very attractively priced. I can't figure out what kind of screen it is. I don't think it's IPS because it's only got 250 in brightness. But still, when you consider a 22-inch, that's a huge screen. I mean, like a 23-inch monitor is pretty standard these days for me. So 22 inches, I'm like, that gives you a lot of room. It's 1080p. It just seems to have everything that it really needs: DVI, HDMI input, and everything else. For me, it'd be a treat. I can't say that I'd use it enough, but I know some guys who absolutely every day, because they do enough in Illustrator, they do enough in Photoshop, or they're doing touch-ups and stuff like that. The main reason why I never gravitated towards it is because they never had a lot of buttons for macros, and then I found myself constantly moving on and off my keyboard too much. And I don't know. I grew up, playing video games with a mouse, so I
worked with an artist that did a really great job with this. I needed some of those. Have you ever seen those deals where basically you want something to be drawn and then it to come into existence in After Effects? So you kind of sketch it out, and you're like, okay, this thing happens, and it's sketching as you're talking about it, and then it rolls into an actual picture of the image. Mm-hmm. I worked with an artist. His name is Amos Joseph, and he has the Cintiq tablet version of this. It's like a $3,000 unit, and he's done a number of those for me when I'm doing like motion graphics and stuff. I'm not a good hand drawing type of artist, and so I hire him for those things. And I told him about this, and he was like, "Yeah, I already have one on order. It's coming. I'm really excited about it." And I was like, "Well, what are you going to do with your Cintiq tablet?" And he told me that this one was going to be his secondary. So he has a couple of different workstations throughout his home that he does his drawing and sketches from. And this one, it's so cheap compared to his other units that he's just going to install it at one of his workstations down in the basement or up in his room. So when he's changing rooms, he doesn't have to carry, because the Cintiq tablet, I believe, is a complete computer all in one. So it's got a full processor, RAM, all the works, but it makes it very heavy. It's like a large gaming laptop. This just is a monitor and an interface. Now, I am concerned about the parallax on this. I don't know how thick the screen glass is on these, and if you've ever used one, that can be an issue. But $599 is a bargain, and I'm kind of running through these pretty fast because I'm trying to cut the show length down, guys. A few of you have complained when we roll into an hour and a half, so less rambling, more going through. The next one up on the list here is actually from Olympus, and this is kind of exciting. If you remember how popular and excited people were about the 5-axis image stabilization from the OMD EM5 Mark II. That started out at around $1,100. That camera is now down to $727 new on the gray market on eBay. And that is an extremely affordable buy. It is 1080p, but you do have that image stabilization that everybody was really excited about. Devin, now that the price is dropped, do you think we're going to see a replacement for this camera, or is this going to be the entry line on Olympus's lineup for a while to come?
I feel like the Mark II has come out so recently. I feel like it hasn't. It's been what? It's I think
it's only been a year and a little bit more than a year.
But I feel like we would see a GH5 before we'd see a Mark III on this camera. Just because, I don't know, Olympus to me isn't the kind of company that sits here and spits out cameras all the time. At least
I don't know, man. You got the OMD 1, you got the 5 EM5. You've got the new Pin F. And the Pin F, like arguably, it's offering up some of the features that you would expect to see in the higher end of their lineup. The Pin F has a 20 megapixel sensor and some other interesting features that aren't available yet in their more robust, so to speak, line, the 1, the 5, and the 10. So, all of these are starting along in the tooth as far as specs go.
Yeah, but I think that this has less to do with a new camera coming out and more to do with probably under anticipated sales. because while that video stabilization, that 3-axis internal stabilization was really sweet, we've seen they've been doing updates to it too to make sure that it works properly with the image stabilization with the lenses that are compatible on this Micro Four Thirds camera. And all that being considered, I just don't think a lot of people bought it. And I think Olympus, I don't know if it was necessarily the media or Olympus, but to me it got marketed as kind of like a video camera with internal stabilization, which no one else has. Check this out. And then the bit rate and everything else coming from the sensor, it just ended up with a really soft image that none of the professionals who use mirrorless cameras for video production really then gravitated towards it, because they're like, okay. So
this did see an upgrade, though. Wasn't it a 77 megapixel or 77 meg Kodak versus the like 20 or 25 meg Kodak that they were offering in previous models?
Yeah, but I think overall, though, the image was still soft. I think whether or not you use the stabilization, I think there just wasn't a lot of detail. And I don't know if that comes down to how the H.264 encoding is done, or if that's how it's descaling or whatever, or scaling down the image sensor. So one way or another, I haven't met a video guy that once it came out was interested in it anymore. So going up to it, it kind of seemed like, this could be something people could consider next to a GH4, because it's kind of priced around there, considering GH4 dropped so far in price and everything else. But I don't know. In terms of video guys, no one seems to care anymore. And so I think this is just Olympus responding to the fact that no one's paying attention to their camera.
Now, from a strictly aesthetic point of view, how do you feel about the Olympus versus the GH4, the OMD5 and the EM5, man, there's so many letters in that name. The 5 and the 10 and the 1, and now the Pin F, all of those, even though they don't have all the specs I would look for in a Micro Four Thirds camera, they look really attractive, in my opinion. You think these are sexy cameras and they're just like the hipster buy?
No, yeah. I think, well, they're staying true to what everyone expects their camera to look like, whether that's good or bad. For me personally, though, the aesthetics never matter that much to me. I'm more about comfort, and most of these cameras don't have the same kind of surprising, amazing comfort that like the GH3 and GH4 have. Because something about a camera being so small but fitting really well in your hand, I think, is hard to do. And the only time I've come across a small camera that's fit well has been like the GH3 and then the GH4, because it has the same body. Even the like Canon series, like the T2i on up, I hated the way that grip feels. As well as the stuff on Nikon was a little bit better. But
would it be better with real leather?
No, it wouldn't be better with real leather, because I don't care about that stuff. Heck, you know me, I put crap in rigs. Half the time I'm not even touching the camera. So, yeah.
It's true. For stills, though, the attractiveness of that black on silver has always got me. It's one of those things that, like, I don't need it, and I know it doesn't have what I need, but I love the look of it. And my friend TJ does graphic design work for me on a regular basis, and he was asking about cameras, and in the end, he ended up on a Fuji X10, I think, one of the older ones, because number one, he's like, it's very stylish, and number two, it was on the used market for $140, and I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, I look kind of professional and hip when I'm wearing this camera. Like, well, I guess I never really thought about my camera as a strictly fashion accessory. Moving on down the line to some more accessories, I myself have picked up a few new lenses to my Micro Four Thirds lineup, and it is now I've lopsided my collection. My number of Micro Four Thirds lenses has exceeded my number of full frame Canon lenses, and that's with these two new purchases. I've got the Panasonic 15mm f1.7, which is a very sharp, wide, and very nice feeling lens, as well as the Olympus 8mm f1.8. And I know I threw these in because these are both lenses that Devin has been jonesing for. We've actually been sharing images back and forth, taking a look at the sharpness on the 15mm f1.7. And Devin, what do you think about both these lenses? I mean, I'm using one right now actually to film this podcast. This is the 8mm f1.8 from Olympus. The 15mm, you've seen some of the shots I've gotten out of that so far. What do you think of it?
I really like the 15, and I could actually see using the 15 for actual video production. The 8 is a really fun lens, and I'd love to run it around for photography purposes. But in the video world, I feel like it would just be a specialty lens for my kind of uses.
Skateboard videos, music videos, weird perspective videos. I love.
I don't
this
know.
wide.
To me, that's not general purpose. To me, that's a specific look that belongs in a specific video, which means it's a specific lens. But in terms of photography, I'd love to run around with an 8. There's so much fun I could have with that. But the 15, 1.7 is, fast enough for Micro Four Thirds camera, and the pricing on it isn't terrible. It's, $410 or so, depending on where you get it from. And so that one I'm really interested in. Plus I like having autofocus and stuff like that. I'm just kind of more surprised that you've whittled down your Canon collection and now you've got a lot of Micro Four Thirds stuff. And what does it feel like to, be slowly leaving that Canon camp?
I haven't completely left the Canon lineup. I still have all my Canon primes, which is, my 24 all the way through my 135. All of my L glass primes I've held on to. But I have scaled back in terms of zooms. I still have my Tamron 24 to 70 f2.8, but I did get rid of my 24 to 105 f4. I've had for a long time both the 17 to 35 millimeter f2.8 and the 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8, and I just let the 17 go. I've had that for 10 plus years, so it's been in my collection quite some time. But I find myself shooting more and more with Micro Four Thirds. I really like the format, and now that I can get stuff like this ultra wide that I'm on right now, the reason it's so convenient to shoot on the GH4 is because lenses are so freaking small, and having lenses that are the size of a lens cap for a full frame body just makes all the difference in the world on your back when you're carrying stuff. And it's
Absolutely.
not as aesthetically pleasing a lot of times as I would like out of my full frame body, but I'm the only one who notices, it seems. So no one really complains about it when I bring Micro Four Thirds kit to a shoot and I get away with shooting all day and that they're happy with the results. And it's kind of made me like, well, if they don't care, well, maybe I shouldn't care as much.
Like I told you, man, if you've got a client that needs to be impressed, just throw a matte box on it.
Now,
that's always the rule of thumb.
The other thing I've been using a ton, and while we're talking about lenses, and actually one more thing to point out on the 8mm before we change subjects, the 8mm f1.8 has basically a focus range of up to 4 inches from the front of the element. So you can basically fill an entire screen with just an eyeball and a nose if you want to. And that look is very unique. You can't get that out of much of anything else. And on top of that, at f1.8, it's still a quarter the size of the Olympus 7 to 14 millimeter wide-angle zoom. So when I just want to pack a really wide-angle lens, I'll just throw this in instead of that because that is fairly substantial for a Micro Four Thirds lens. Now, the other thing I've been using, and I actually didn't grab it on this lens because I'm not paying attention, but this right here, the Metabones Speed Booster, now that they've added AF controls to this that are, with the latest firmware update, are really fairly accurate. They keep up with that Keppen adapter that I picked up that doesn't have the focal reducer in it. This has become a really handy thing to have in my kit, and I've been carrying that around with both the 50mm f1.4 and the 85mm f1.8. And I say I'm thinning my Canon herd, and then I'm holding up non-L primes that I also own L versions of. But these two lenses are fairly light. They don't really weigh down the GH4 body, and with the adapter, you're getting somewhere in the range of like a 60-ish focal range, and then with the 85, you're getting somewhere in the 100-ish range, and a little bit more light into the sensor, really good images. Although I just had to throw away a shoot, and I'm gonna have to go reshoot this next week. I got some really weird purple fringing out of the 85 with the speed booster attached to it. So I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'm gonna have to pay more attention. But I shot in 4K, and then I was looking at the edges, and I was just getting this horrible purple fringing out of this lens that I haven't seen before. So I don't know if there's any kind of light bouncing around inside of there or some other.
I've heard a few stories of that. I've heard a few people who stopped using speed boosters because of some issue with internal refraction that was causing some weird fringing, because focal reducer is supposed to reduce things like the natural fringing that comes off of a lens. But I don't know for sure, and I think it really kind of maybe depends on lens to lens, depending on how the internal lens structure is designed.
Yeah, and I only had it with the 85 and not with the 50, so I'm not sure. I'm going to have to do some more experiments to find out. And it might have just been the angle of the light coming in. When you add the speed booster to these lenses, especially if you forget to take off your UV filter, sometimes light will bounce around in there in such a weird way that you get unexpected flaring and some other strange results. Now, the next thing on the list here is actually for you, Devin. I wanted to talk about this just briefly. Mitch and I basically discussed the Sony A6 6300, which is an awesome priced $1,000 4K APS-C sensor camera that basically it dishes out most of what you get out of the A7, the new current A7 lineup. What do you think about this? Are you going to buy the A6300?
You know what? It's like right on the edge. Like I consider it like, oh, here's a second camera that'll do 4K. It'll give me a log format. It'll also do 120 FPS. There's all these options. But then I think towards the end of it, it's like it's still a like smaller camera package that doesn't have all the dedicated ports I'm looking for and all the dedicated switches for manual control. And this will only exist as a B camera, and it would be really difficult to use as a primary or as an A camera. So for me personally, there's a lot of great features there, and I could see it maybe being a great camera for maybe somebody first time who wants 4K and wants log and 120 FPS, and they're willing to deal with kind of the usability headaches of having a much smaller camera format. You know, and a lot of people like being able to use it with speed boosters and stuff like that. There's a lot of options.
How do you feel about
too.
battery life?
Oh, dude, I imagine the battery's nothing on this. I mean, it's things like that too, where like, this has a lot of great video features, but it's so far from a video camera that I almost just have to like be like, no, Devin, this isn't going to help you. It's just going to hinder you because I'm too worried about being able to move quickly and not having to go through a bazillion menus to set stuff up and get stuff ready. So
I can't imagine it's going to be any worse than the A7S as far as menus are concerned, but I think I'm leaning towards buying it.
Of course you are, because it's a camera.
Yeah, thanks, man. No, at that price, though, I feel like this could be, you grab a speed booster, you slap it in my Canon kit, and when I take my 5D Mark III and my 6D out for shooting, this gives me pseudo full frame look, 4K image with a speed booster and full adaptability to my Canon glass. A number of you guys commented when Mitch and I talked about this camera about autofocus, and I just wanted to point out that I do in fact have the A7S, and I do shoot on it regularly, and I do have native glass like this 24-70 f4 right here. And I'm not speaking from, non-experience when I say that Sony's AF systems have not impressed me at all. They are pretty awful. And I know that this camera, the A6300, has some extra features in the AF lineup, but I can't imagine that it's going to outdo the new A7 lineup. So unless there's something that I don't know, I suspect the AF is going to be not as good as what you get out of the top-of-the-line cameras. So I just want to put that out there. I know a couple of people were pretty adamant that I didn't know what I was talking about when it comes to AF on Sony cameras. And here's my Sony camera. And I've shot on the A7S Mark II, shot on the A7, on the original A7S. So none of those have very good AF with the native glass, and it hasn't gotten any better.
But back to the A6300 real quick. I mean, am I correct here? There's no headphone jack? Or is there some kind of like fancy adapter system? It's like little things like that that it's just going to get in my way.
So it is capable of working with the K1M system, which is that smart hot shoe adapter that's available for Sony cameras. So the same thing that you could use on all of the lineup, including the X10, X100, the A7 series. So you can use that, and that gives you basically full-fledged audio features for the camera, including XLR, phantom power, and all that stuff. So you do have that option, but that is a $600+ extra. You can find them used on eBay for under $500 if you're lucky. But still, that puts this into the $1,600 range, so not quite as affordable. For me, though, I wouldn't see myself using this as audio in. This would be like a great B camera or a great starter camera, like you were saying. So at $1,000, though, I mean, you could afford to buy a couple of these for the price of a 5D Mark III, or 3 of these for the price of an A7S Mark II. So that's a lot of value at that price range, and I can't imagine that we'll see any more cameras from Sony that don't have 4K included, because it seems like they're just peppering that on every single camera that's released.
Yeah, now it's standard.
Now, moving on down the line to GH4 Rumors. Let's talk about this for a second, and then roll into some new sensor tech from Panasonic, because I kind of think those two might go hand in hand. Looks like the firmware mentioned on micro4thirdsrumors.com, they're basically saying that we could see a major firmware update for the GH4. And before we dive into possible GH5 rumors, Devin, what do you think they would add to the GH4 that would be enough to be considered a major firmware upgrade?
That's interesting, because I really doubt that they would give out Vlog for free, because it screws over the people who've already paid. So I don't think they would do that. I think that'd be a.
You think it's going to be another pay for play firmware update?
No, because I'm not sure what else they could add that firmware wise would make much of a difference. I think it's probably just going to be a lot of usability fixes. Because I don't know. I think they've already stretched the processor and the sensor as far as it goes. Well, so I'm not expecting anything radical like new frame rates or anything like that, because I feel like they've done as much as they can in that part. And the only thing they can do is just kind of things like log and other formats.
What about a higher bit rate format for 4K?
I don't think
maybe you crank that up to 200 meg.
That up to 200. I don't think that the processor has the power for that. I think the actual H.264 encoder that does all that crunching, I don't think it can manage that many pixels and flow out that much data. I think just that the reason why that limit's in place is because of either a heating problem or because it's just beyond the physical limitations of the chips in there. And I could be wrong, but I don't see what else would be in there for them to add besides, just usability fixes or some kind of like fancy Wi-Fi setup that allows the Wi-Fi to work better, do remote shooting, or do live streaming to, Periscope or something like that. We saw GoPro added live streaming to Periscope. But that's something it could be. Like, it could literally just be some kind of little thing like that, being like, hey, take your GH4 and stream to Periscope. So I don't know. That's why I think it's just going to be a huge chunk of stability and usability fixes.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what they could add to the GH4 that would just blow my mind, or I would even consider a huge update. And the only thing that I could think of was, a possible larger bit rate for 4K recording, because you have the 200 meg limit for 1080p. So if they could somehow swing that, and to me, it wouldn't be a CPU issue, because the encoding is done after it goes through the image processor. So they could. It seems like they could. Although heating, that's true. That might be a thing.
Well, otherwise, I understand that they've got it's a dedicated encoding is the way that it works, and it's not, it's tied into their, what do they call their thing, the Venus or something?
Yeah,
like
the
that?
Venus Engine 9.
The Venus Engine. I know
like
it's like tied into that, but what I'm thinking here is that the encoding chip, if you give it 4K pixels, it then has to, because it's doing temporal compression, it has to start finding groups. And if it's finding groups of pixels that are very high resolution, because it's going all the way up to 200 megabit, that's going to be a lot more effort and cycles and everything else that the encoding chip has to do in order to fit that information, where if the encoding chip is just looking for 100 megabit worth, it'll use lower resolution groups and therefore doesn't require as much memory in order to get that printed out in the H.264 file. So I could see that, that's why I think they have that limitation in there, is because whatever the encoder is has the physical limitation of, if you give it that many pixels, it just can't go that far into detail with it because it doesn't have the memory for it.
Now, what about possibly 1080p RAW?
No.
You don't think so?
Well, they wouldn't. What is it going to do? A Cine D, compressed Cine DNG?
Yeah, you could do Cinema DNG on this camera. In camera, it wouldn't be anything more taxing than what you would be putting on the 5D Mark III, which has arguably older ARM processor inside, and you have the bandwidth as far as recording bus goes to the SD card, because it's already capable of handling a 200 meg stream. So raw DNG doesn't seem like it would be implausible, and that would be a feature that would revitalize the GH4 and make people really excited about it.
I think it's more than 200 megabit.
You think so?
I don't have the facts in front of me because because think about it. The 1080p RAW out of the Pocket Cinema camera that I've used a lot requires a card that does 95 megabytes per second.
Yeah,
which is way above 200 megabit.
Yeah, and you need that to do 1080p in the 200 megabit codec on the GH4. You need
a SanDisk 95 megabit.
Yeah,
card?
Exactly. And I've got one right.
I thought it was bigger than ProRes HQ, because ProRes HQ is like 200, 220 megabit a second, right?
I mean, it could be possible that they did like DNG with like a 1:2 ratio of compression. So then it'd be like a slightly lossy raw DNG, which.
But then here's the thing: is that then the chip, they need some kind of encoding that's going to do DNG compressed, because DNG raw could be done by the 5D because of the fact that it didn't require compression, so it was just laying down raw data and putting it into files.
But Panasonic has access to basically the bare rails as far as the ARM processor in there goes, so they have a lot more control of how the CPU processes and what kind of compression and so on is going through it. So if the chip is capable of outputting raw stills at like 11 frames per second at full sensor size, then it doesn't seem impossible to do raw DNG. I don't know. I mean, I'm just throwing stuff at the wall there, but to me, if you did something like that, that would take the GH4 and people would be very excited about it again. I bet you'd see it go back up to full price or close to full price, and they'd be flying off the shelves. I mean, I don't want to shoot raw because I don't want to deal with that hassle, especially a Cinema DNG hassle. If you could give me red code where I can just drop it in and work with it and have my color settings follow my image all the way around, and that would be great. But raw DNG I'm not a fan of. But still, I know a ton of people that would be a buy right there, and that's much more positive than what the flat image style that barely works on the GH4.
That would be a mind-blowing upgrade if that was actually possible. That would
get you all the way to 2017, which would then bring you into a brand new sensor technology from Panasonic. Looking at this patent here, and I said patent the way Devin would say patent.
You jerk.
This is kind of interesting. This is basically a method that Panasonic is developing for dumping out an oversaturated pixel so that it can continue to collect light. And if you're not familiar with the process of image capturing or an image pixel sensor, once enough light has come into it, it reaches saturation, and that's when you overexpose your image on that particular portion. With this, it's able to collect that information, dump it, and continue to collect more information, and because of that, it gives you an expanded dynamic range, and we're looking at this right now. Devin, we were talking about this before the show, and didn't you mention you thought this was going to be used primarily for self-driving cars?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Panasonic's press release talks about how this technology would be very important for conditions where you can't control lighting. They specifically brought out examples from like self-driving cars being able to, because a lot of self-driving car systems, not that this is a podcast about robotics, but self-driving car systems, we've seen them started off like the Google project where they start off using, oh my goodness, using LiDAR or something like that. My Amazon Echo just freaked out there for a second. I'm sorry. They use LiDAR, or the robots, they know I'm talking about them. They're coming to life. They use like a LiDAR system to figure out where objects are, and then based on the shape of an object, they would profile it as a possible pedestrian or another car or, signs and stuff like that. And then they kind of came to a conclusion, a lot of car manufacturers are like, you know what, actually just a camera. If we have a really good camera with really good optics, the computer can see a lot better just with visual light than necessarily LiDAR. So a lot of them are using combinations of systems, but one of the problems is then when it's nighttime, cameras can't see nearly as good as people can. So a lot of that being able to identify what's a person and what's a speed limit sign and everything else becomes a whole lot harder when it's dark. And you can only rely on the car's headlights so much because a lot of stuff that jumps out in front of a car is not within your headlights. So that's where they kind of, have been talking about this technology. And in the show notes, you'll see like a kind of an example of the dynamic range and things like that so that it can garner a lot more detail. Things don't get blown out. So if the car camera in this case is like facing the sun, you're not going to get huge silhouettes and, a lot of bloom. You're going to like be able to see clearly defined edges of objects, which are very important for calculating distance and motion and everything else, as well as being able to have a global shutter, because bouncing around on a car, things like a rolling shutter is just going to make the job of identifying objects that much harder for a computer. So all that kind of stuff put together, that's what they're marketing it as. They haven't necessarily talked about any plans to put in any of their consumer products, but this is a technology they're developing and they're looking at going down the road. They're developing it in conjunction with Fuji. So I imagine if they start producing consumer equipment with this, cameras and whatnot, I imagine Fuji's going to come out with a similar line as well, because they're in there as well helping them out. So now, I think it's really exciting stuff, but they're kind of talking about, like DJ's going to bring up here, that it's like 2017 maybe when we see something like this.
GH5.
Yeah, and people are like, oh, it'll be in the GH5, and I'm like, I feel like it's a little early for that. I feel like there would be a tech demo before I'd say that it'd actually be out there, because the images they send us, none of it is an image of an actual product. Or even just an actual sensor. Or at least I've not found any. And there hasn't been like a tech demo being like, here's some examples of it working. What I think we've been seeing is mock-ups, examples of how it will work, which is what they need in order for it to secure the patent. As well as just a few examples that probably come out of a laboratory where they may have like a 300 by 300 pixel sensor that they're just testing technology on instead of some kind of like 18 or 20 megapixel sensor that actually be in a consumer product. So, it's like I said, if I actually saw a tech demo or I saw like, here's an actual picture from this sensor, then I'd be like, okay, I could see this coming around in a product in a year or two. But right now everyone's really hoping, they're like, yeah, it'll be in the GH5. And according to rumors, GH5 will be here in 2017 or something like that. I will say that if Panasonic's going to push the GH5 to 2017, then either last year or this year, they need to come out with something that at least keeps interest in the products, considering how fast Sony is dumping out products, which is unfortunate because really they should just be working on making really good products and letting that stand, for a couple of years rather than, we need to, update and tweak it a tiny bit and re-release it every, year and a half.
Sony sales have really slumped because of that. They're hammering out pretty much the same product with one upgrade, the 4K edition.
It's the Canon T2i, all over again. And that kind of stuff, as I'm sure Canon has seen from their Rebel series, that kind of thinking only gets you so far. I think it's a short-term win and it's a long-term loss. But in any case, it'll be interesting to see what Panasonic will do. Once again, the rumor, which I don't know if it's really confirmed by two sources, I'm not a journalist, and I don't know if the rumor mill's a journalist either. But you know, a firmware update in a few months would make sense to me. The timing all makes sense to me. But it'd be interesting to see what they come up with, because like you said, hey, if it was something really mind-blowing like RAW, it would get a bunch of people to pick up their GH4s again, and that may carry them over to have a huge product launch the year after. So I'm excited to see what they have in store.
Now, we continue to talk about the GH4. Let's look at this Yuneec. Is that how you pronounce that,
I have
Devin?
no idea how to pronounce it. Don't even
it's
ask me.
Yuneec. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it correctly. So I'm going to go with Yuneec. This Yuneec camera basically they're saying they're selling a GH4 that has been reconditioned and shaped to be the perfect image stabilized camera for both flight as well as handheld use. They've got an app to go along with this, as well as a nice looking controller. I don't really know what to say about this, Devin, other than that they are claiming it's a GH4. And I mean, right there in the literature, integrated GH4 camera with a zoom lens. This is a strange...
I'm guessing this is... Now, the zoom lens, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that's a Panasonic or because it has their branding on it, because normally there'd be, reasons why you'd throw like Lumix or Zeiss on the end of a lens, even if it's not necessarily a part of that lens. If you are able to license it because you're using that technology, you usually do because, marketing. But in this case, it looks like they're using a GH4 sensor from Panasonic, and all they've done is strip this sucker down so that it is just a sensor that records a few formats, and it's got a gimbal that's perfectly balanced to it. But by doing that without having, necessarily the screen in the back and everything else, it probably means it uses a lot less wattage. So you can run it straight off of a copter's batteries, which would be super helpful, as well as, it's going to be a balanced camera. You won't have to sit here and fuddle with the gyroscopes and everything else, as well as just overall, it's going to be a nice tight package. For me, it's not necessarily worth the price because I'm willing to spend the extra money. I could see it being a package deal for some people to like throw this together. I think it's a little over $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I was looking for the pricing on here. I'm not seeing it standing out.
Last time I saw the price, I want to say it was maybe $1,200. I'm not totally sure on that. Don't quote me on that. But I think that includes the gimbal as well. So, because from what I can see, it's like there's no battery, there's none of that stuff. It's like this is the lightest, smallest package you can do for this. And it's kind of nice to see that it's mostly universal, that you'd be able to, find a way to attach this to any quadcopter. You don't have to buy theirs, though obviously you can buy it as a package deal. So I think it's interesting. This makes sense to me, and to be honest, I think this would look better than the DJI camera. I don't know exactly what sensor or tech they're using in the DJI.
The X5, I believe, is using the same sensor that we're seeing in the GH4, as well as this E1Z cam that I'm using right now. So,
but what bit rate is the DJI pulling? Because they've got the 100 megabit 30 FPS 4K that the GH4 has in this Yuneec. And
well, that's the thing. So you can
lower bit rate.
No, you can, if you buy the extra attachment, which is an attachable SSD, you can write pure RAW, I believe even 4K out of
really?
the
From
X5.
the DJI?
Yes, but it's going to cost you because you have to buy the external SSD adapter and all that business. Internally, I think it's limited to 100 meg codecs, same as the GH4. So in 4K, that's what I remember off the top of my head. I wasn't planning on talking about it, so I'm just quoting from like memory there.
And I just thought of it now. All right, so, but either case, it's just another option for people who are on the drones. I'm still not in a position where I would buy a dedicated camera just for a drone. I'm kind of fine right now with GoPros, especially too if you throw the GoPro into medium or narrow view, you can get some really great looking images that don't look like a drone shot.
Except that those features aren't available when you're shooting in 4K.
No, of course not. So, but it's one of those. It's like we ask, is that feature worth the extra money to you? And right now, I don't do enough with drones. There's a few guys out there who are dedicated. I think there was a story recently. There's more registered drone pilots now than there are like personal or full-size aircrafts in the world. Like, the registration is off the charts because after Christmas, everyone got registered for their drones.
Well, and the price goes up here in a couple more weeks to the full price for registration.
Yeah,
Before
that's
it was
right,
like $5. So
they were enticing people to do it early. So, it'll be interesting where that goes, because obviously there's a lot of moral arguments and logistical arguments when it comes to all the drones flying around. But in terms of us filmmakers, like I've said before, with a lot of the other cool camera stuff that comes out, is that it's really great for a few select things. But for me, it's not an everyday occurrence. If I was a drone pilot, it'd be an everyday occurrence. But since I'm not, things like a really good lens is something I'll use every day. Quadcopters, as much fun as I have because I love RC stuff, is not an everyday use for me. So I wouldn't buy a dedicated camera in any case.
all right, last thing on the list here is actually this guy. If you aren't familiar with the Blackmagic Assist, it's a nice little recording device that's also a monitor. It packs a lot of features, and it's in the sub $500 price range. As with many Blackmagic products, possibly came out half-baked. I don't know for sure, but I do know that they're adding some very integral features with this 1.2 firmware update. Looks like, Devin, drumroll please, they are going to finally be able to tell you how much time is left on your SD card for recording. But
it's sad that now this is expected from this company. I never actually, now I did actually, while I was at the caucus, saw one of these in person and got to touch it and use it for the first time. And so I didn't notice, because I wasn't the one directly running it, that it doesn't show you the remaining time on the SD card. That seems like a huge oversight. I don't understand how you can ship out a product that's missing that. This reminds me of the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera when it first came out, and it didn't come out with RAW. This one didn't come out with DNx HD, even though every other product in their lineup does have DNx HD. It's still like really reasonably priced. There's a few other things I found with it that I was kind of frustrated by. For one, there's a certain usability aspect that's a bit off. When I was going through the menus on this, because it's all touchscreen based, I got into an area of a menu that didn't have a way to go back to the previous menu. Now, the other guys I was with, they just kind of stared at it because they were looking for a back button or something to go to a previous screen. I don't know. I grew up with smartphones in a way, more or less, kind of. And so I did like a pinch to zoom thing, and it went back. But there was nothing to describe how to do that. I'm sure it was probably in the manual, but, how many people read through the manual fully except for DJ and me? So it's true, DJ. That's how he spends his Saturdays. He sits on the couch and just goes through PDFs all day.
I'm actually trying to figure out how to program the Saramonic RX and TX10 to transmit via IR, because that's how you program the receiver portion or the transmitter portion via the receiver. So that part, woo.
To get them synced up.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to get you off track.
No. I'm excited to see that review when it comes out too. But they added some extended zebra range playback clip information panel, which I'm guessing is just like how long the clip is and stuff like that. And then another big one is actually HDMI record triggering, which would allow a lot of DSLR users of this equipment.
I didn't know that was even missing. What an oversight.
Well, I think that I could kind of see them releasing without it, because they didn't strictly advertise it, and it's one of those that it's starting to become expected, but there's still a lot of portable recorders out there that don't have those options.
Well, it's been out for quite some time, the Ninja 2, that was one of the key touting features, is that, guess what, guys? We worked with Canon, and as soon as you press record on your Canon 5D Mark III, you'll get recording via HDMI trigger on the Ninja 2. I had just assumed that this would have that because it's supposed to be sort of competing in that same field.
And to be honest, too, the Blackmagic Shuttle, which is their $150 portable SSD recorder with SDI and HDMI input, it actually does that as well. So that's,
oh, really? So they already have it integrated, and they just didn't bother adding it to
another product, and they didn't bring it to this product yet. Yeah, I don't get their thinking on it. I don't know why this always I don't get why. It seems like their software department's just like underdeveloped, or just one guy working there being like, I'm trying to get it done in time. I don't know what's going on, but for people that do have it, this will all be welcome features and upgrades for it. It's still a super reasonably priced touchscreen, 1080p. It looks really brilliant. It looks really nice, and you get both SDI and HDMI in, recording to an SD card, which is nice and convenient.
Now, you got to play with this, Devin. The question I have for you, since I haven't seen one in person yet, what does the screen look like? Is it good? Is it a nice screen, or are we talking like...
No, the blacks were actually really good. It looked like a nice little 1080p IPS display. I don't know if it is IPS, but it looked about on par with like a $150, $200 monitor these days. If you were to get like a 5-inch $300 monitor, or
so this isn't some awful TN type of thing where you get off to the side, you can't even see it.
No, the viewing angles on it were really good, and the colors were good. I don't know how accurate it was, because it's not like I was sitting there dialing it in or anything. But I wasn't a fan of the Canon batteries in the back, because all my stuff is Sony MP. So, but still. The screen actually was kind of impressive. I didn't have a chance to really pull focus on it and really play around with it. But my first impressions was the blacks are good. It's nice and vibrant, and it looked to me like an IPS. And I don't know if it was, but I don't know. I stare at enough screens. I feel like I'd know an IPS when I see it. So.
Well, it says the angle of view is 135 degrees, so that's a fairly
That sounds like
IPS.
IPS.
So it's either IPS or one of the early flavors, like the VSIP or
OLED.
No, I don't think it's OLED. In that size of screen, 5-inch, you think they? I don't think that. No, I'm gonna go with no. It's not OLED.
No.
But, all right. So that's it for that. I think I am ready to get out of here, Devin, so we don't ramble too much longer. You got anything else you want to talk about before we go?
No, I'm sorry. My brain's a little fried. It's been a tough week.
Hey, welcome to the club, man. Now, your week sounds way worse than mine. On that note, guys, you can find us on Twitter at DSLR FILM NOOB and at DevoCut. You can find me at DSLRFilmNoob.com. You can also find this podcast anywhere podcasts are distributed, including iTunes, SoundCloud, and so on. Devin, do you have anything else to add before we go?
Go out there and get shooting.
All right. Thanks, review, subscribe. Sometimes we'll do the things that you do. We'll see you next time. What a bad ending. I'm not good at this today.
No, we're both out of it.
Man,
this cold's catching up to me.
Yeah, get some sleep, get some rest, Devin. I'll probably have that Ceramonic review up, I want to say Friday of this week. I've got a couple more things to do, figure out that IR blaster thing.
I can
tell you
the G2s and the G3 sync up as well.
Yeah, you
should be pretty familiar with it.
The G3 syncs up that way. The G2
is just manual, right?
Is just manual, and honestly, the IR blaster thing, it's fairly straightforward. You set one to receive from the receiver, and then you turn the receiver to IR blast, and it sends the channel assignment over, which is pretty easy to figure out. It's just that the menus aren't as intuitive as I was expecting, so you don't use set, or there isn't a menu dedicated key, so you're kind of arrowing up and down and then holding set and then holding another button in order to turn things on and off, and then hitting set again, and it's just a little bit different.
Is it able to hunt for frequencies? Is it able to tell you if there's a clean one, or
do
an auto?
Yeah, you can do an auto on the receiver and then send that information to the transmitter.
Okay.
But the transmitter itself isn't capable.
Like the G2s and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So you can check for occupied channels. The one I have is in the 600 megahertz range, which, if you're not familiar with the U.S. spectrum, may be going away in the next year or two. But I did get assurances from Ceramonic that they are going to be addressing that and issuing multiple frequency assignments for future models. The other thing that's pretty interesting is this is compatible with any of the TRS lav mics, and it provides very good, clean audio quality. There isn't any kind of noise or anything floating around in the signal. So for the price, it sounds really decent. And I just tested it out last week. I took it across a soccer field and did like 480 feet and was still able to continue to get the signal. I did see a little bit of a volume fall off, but so far, I think they're planning on pricing this at $270 for the base model, which is the receiver that's capable of receiving 2 channels and a single lav pack. At $270,
how much did you say?
$270, I think, is what they're
nuts.
aiming for. That is an amazing price. And I think they're going to add the extra lav pack. If you want to use 2 lav packs with a single receiver, it'll be somewhere in the range of $400. So $130 for the individual units. It is a really good deal. I mean, even with the few gripes, like the fact that even though the receiver receives 2 channels, it only is capable of outputting a stereo signal of that channel cloned across the left and the right. So you don't have channel separation between those two. It's still, man, they got a good product on their hands. I think this is, I'm spoiling my own review, but
did you say that that was possible? That was a possible firmware fix?
Yeah, I did talk to Saramonic about it, and they've been getting my feedback here every week, and I think they're going to allow for a software switch that will give you the opportunity to either have channel 1 on the left or right and channel 2 on the left or right, so that way you have individual channel isolation. I don't think that's a word. Isolation, not isolation. But right now, I don't know if that's something that's user upgradable. So that may be something that has to be done down the line. So I will keep you posted on that. Probably see that coming up pretty soon. And Devin, you got a review in as well, don't you?
I do. Yeah, I've already got some of Asden's got another microphone. So they sent it to Devin because that's what Devin does. He reviews Asden microphones. And I've finally got a shooting space kind of set up too. So I've got a few other things going on too that I got to kick out as well. So.
Yeah, and also, studio is finally starting to get taken care of. As you can see, my bald head right there. Also have a giant table.
No, I love that workspace. I wish I had something like that was like that deep, that had a lot of counter space.
It's kind of cheesy back here in the back. The IKEA PAX cabinets or whatever, the regular square ones. I was able to make 2 of them by hacking them and drilling them together. So I have one that goes up, and then I have another one that lays sideways, and then I added cabinets to these, and then I don't know where I got these drawers, but they're like the chalk drawn drawers. Very classy.
That is classy.
And goes right along with my hipster camera that I plan to buy tomorrow.
Well, I tell you that you make that room look huge with that wide-angle lens.
Oh, man.
You made it look twice the size of your old room.
No, it's pretty small. I mean, this is like a 10 by 12 or 12 by 13, something like that. Not a giant place, but at least all my stuff is off of the floor now. And I just got done with a shoot and was able to actually use the table to organize my bags as opposed to the floor, which, dogs have been kicking lenses over. It's a disaster area. All right, I am done with that extra bit of information for you guys. Devin, take care of yourself, man, and we'll see you next week.